spiraled too far, and now everyone in that room was in his way. What followed was chaos. Morrison lunged at Crane, the rifle fired into the ceiling, and suddenly the store became a storm of movement. Fletcher reached for his gun, Tobias slipped toward the back, Willa shouted warnings, and Darius, pistol drawn, ordered them all to stop. He realized one thing clearly. The judge might hold power, Fletcher might hold money, Tobias might hold influence, but only Darius had legal ownership of that cabin. Without him, none of them could touch the evidence beneath the floor. Desperation drove the conversation. Tobias urged partnership, Fletcher sneered, Morrison warned of forces bigger than all of them. And then came the truth, spat out like poison. Crane hadn't been the mastermind at all. Letters buried under the cabin tied everything back to the territorial governor himself, Marcus Webb. Webb had used Crane as a pawn, Tobias as a front, Morrison as muscle. Hartwell had uncovered it, tried to blackmail them, and paid with his life. Now those letters and records could bring down the governor or bury anyone who dared to expose them. Darius suggested a plan: go to the cabin together, retrieve the evidence, and decide then. But before they could act, hoofbeats thundered outside. The governor's men had arrived. The walls of the store shook as gunfire shattered glass. "Too late," Tobias muttered. Darius, thinking fast, shouted for Willa's guidance. She pointed them to an old mining trail. Together, enemies and allies alike fled into the night, bound by one fragile truth: they needed each other to survive. The night ride was treacherous. Horses stumbled on loose shale, moonlight barely guiding their path. Behind them, the governor's men thundered closer, gunfire echoing through the canyon walls. Each rider, Darius, Willa, Fletcher, Tobias, Morrison, and Crane, rode with fear clawing at their backs. They were no longer rivals, they were fugitives bound together by desperation. Judge Crane nearly fell when his horse stumbled. Tobias cursed the trail. Fletcher pressed them forward, but Willa urged patience. She knew these hills better than anyone. After what felt like hours, they reached the cabin at dawn, exhausted but alive. There was no time for rest. Darius stormed inside and pried open the sealed boards, heart pounding as each nail screeched free. Beneath, he uncovered a strongbox heavy with coins and a satchel of documents. The strongbox glimmered with fortune, more money than he had ever seen, but the satchel was the true prize. Inside were letters with the governor's seal, fraudulent deeds, and payment records detailing years of theft and murder. One letter ordered Judge Crane to eliminate Hartwell by any means necessary. Willa's face twisted in grief. "You killed him on the governor's command," she spat. Crane admitted it, broken, his voice cracking with regret. The revelation silenced the room. The corruption wasn't just local. It reached the highest seat of power in the territory. And now the evidence sat in Darius's hands. But even as they realized the enormity of their find, hoofbeats closed in once again. The cabin was surrounded. Through grimy windows, they saw the governor's hired guns, rifles pointed at the cabin. A voice outside shouted, demanding their surrender. Darius knew they wouldn't live to see the inside of a jail cell if they stepped out. Instead, he took a gamble. Stepping onto the porch with the satchel raised high, he called out, "Before you shoot, know this: the governor has betrayed you. Your names, your payments, your orders, they're all in here." He pulled out records, reading aloud amounts paid to each gunman. Nervous shifting rippled through the writers. The judge stepped forward to back the claim, warning that Webb planned to eliminate them after the job was done. Murmurs spread, loyalty wavered. For the first time, the governor's power cracked. Darius seized the moment. "Help us deliver this evidence to the marshal. Testify and you walk free. Stay loyal to Webb and you'll die as his pawns." The gamble worked. The leader dismounted, declaring, "What do you need?" It was the turning point. In that fragile moment of unity, the tide shifted against Governor Webb. Days later in the capital, Governor Marcus Webb was led away in shackles. The evidence from the cabin, letters, deeds, records, was overwhelming. Over $200,000 stolen in fraudulent land grants, countless families robbed, multiple murders ordered and carried out. Judge Crane was arrested, too, but his cooperation earned him leniency. Tobias, Fletcher, and Morrison faced justice, though their testimony helped dismantle the wider conspiracy. Willa Blaine returned to her home, finally able to live comfortably thanks to Darius's gratitude and the gold from the strongbox. And Darius? He kept the cabin, turned the land into a ranch, and built something honest from the ashes of corruption. What had begun as a Darius Gentry never thought that a single coin could change the course of his life. But that's exactly what happened one afternoon in front of the old courthouse. He bought a cabin, 12 acres of good land with a corral, a working well, and sturdy logs for only 25 cents. At first, it felt like a miracle, a once-in-a-lifetime bargain, the kind of story men bragged about for years. Yet as he placed his bid, a silence heavier than stone fell across the crowd. Men with money in their pockets, men who should have outbid him without hesitation, stayed quiet. Their eyes weren't on the property, they were on him. Pity shone on their faces as though he just walked into his own grave. When the gavel came down with a sharp crack, no one cheered, no one grumbled. Instead, they scattered like spooked cattle. But not before whispers floated in the wind. No one's been inside for 15 years. What happened to the last man who tried? A woman named Willa Blaine clutched her shawl and muttered, "You don't want that place, son." Her words lingered, haunting him as he rode toward his newly purchased land. The cabin stood at the end of a winding path, weather-beaten but solid, windows so caked in grime they looked black. Inside, he found dust, ashes in the fireplace, and something more unsettling, the floor. In the center lay a square of boards sealed tight, like a trapdoor someone had tried to bury forever. And just as he noticed it, he saw a shadow outside, a rider with a silver-banded hat watching him before slipping away. Whoever that man was, Darius realized one thing immediately. This cabin hadn't been forgotten. It had been watched, guarded, and now it belonged to him. Determined to prove the cabin's worth, Darius rode into town for tools, but the moment he mentioned his purchase, the room went silent. The storekeeper's hands shook. A woman dropped her sewing basket. An old man shook his head slowly, almost mournfully. Then came Fletcher Knox, the very man Darius had glimpsed by the trees. With sharp eyes, a wide-brimmed hat, and the air of someone used to giving orders, Fletcher approached. "I'll give you $500 for that cabin, tonight, cash in hand." The offer landed like a thunderclap. $500 for something bought with a quarter. It didn't make sense unless what lay beneath that sealed floor was worth much more. Darius refused, and Fletcher's smile vanished. His words chilled the air. "I'm trying to save your life." But before the tension broke, 3 men stormed in, one with a deputy's badge, one dressed fine like a banker, and the third with his hand on a gun. Their leader, Tobias Crow, accused Fletcher of breaking their agreement. Their argument revealed something Darius hadn't expected. They all knew about the sealed floor. Tobias demanded, "Have you opened it yet?" And for the first time, Darius understood. The cabin wasn't abandoned. It was a vault, and the entire town feared what it held. Willa reappeared, voice steady as stone, revealing the truth. Years ago, Samuel Hartwell, the cabin's owner, had hidden documents under those boards. Papers proving widespread fraud, land sold multiple times, money pocketed, families ruined. Samuel had been murdered days after sealing the evidence away. Those documents could destroy powerful men across 3 counties, and now Darius owned them. The room shifted as Willa's revelation cut through the air. Darius finally grasped the weight of his purchase. He hadn't bought land, he had inherited a war. Fletcher, Tobias, and Deputy Morrison argued over what to do next, but their nervous glances betrayed one certainty: those papers were priceless and deadly. Tobias proposed a partnership, offering riches beyond imagination if Darius helped retrieve them. Willa warned it was a trap. They had killed Hartwell, they would kill again. But Morrison denied it, muttering that the real killer was someone else, someone far more dangerous. Darius demanded answers, and Fletcher finally admitted, "The man behind this has enough power to make the whole town forget Samuel ever lived. He's been watching that cabin for 15 years, waiting for a fool to buy it." That's when a voice cut through the room, calm and deadly. A rifle pointed through the window, held by an older man in fine clothes. "I'm afraid none of you will be living to see tomorrow." Willa gasped the name, Judge William Crane. Suddenly everything made sense. The silence of the townsfolk, the pitying stares, the whispers. Crane wasn't just part of the scheme, he had orchestrated it. A judge who turned the law into a weapon, covering up fraud, signing forged deeds, murdering those who stood in the way. Crane entered the store with steady confidence, announcing that Samuel Hartwell had been a blackmailer, that his death was justice. But Darius noticed something. The judge's hands shook, his voice cracked. This wasn't calm control, it was desperation. A man drowning in secrets that had spied. Gamble with a quarter had become the cornerstone of his new life. The 12 acres thrived, cattle roamed freely, and neighbors looked to him not just as a rancher, but as a man who had stood against giants and won. The cabin no longer hid secrets. Its floors were repaired, its windows cleaned, its hearth burning bright with life, not shadows. But late at night, Darius sometimes sat by the fire, remembering the day the gavel struck for 25 cents. He thought of Samuel Hartwell, whose courage had cost him his life, but whose evidence brought justice to hundreds. He thought of Willa's bravery, Fletcher's desperation, Tobias's greed, Crane's downfall, and the governor's arrogance. All of it had led here, to a cabin once cursed, now redeemed. And he thought about himself. Not just a small businessman anymore, but a man who had stood against corruption, who had chosen justice over wealth, who had proven that even the smallest coin could tip the scales of history. That 25-cent bid had been more than a purchase. It had been destiny. And as he looked out across his thriving ranch, he knew it had been the best investment of his life. Friends, thank you for listening to this tale of betrayal, courage, and redemption from the Wild West. If this story gripped you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more incredible frontier stories. Your support keeps these forgotten legends alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next one.